I messed up with my boyfriend and took revenge by cheating on him with a coworker. Now he doesn't want to see me and I want him back. My name is Clara. I'm 27 years old. And this is the story of how I ruined my relationship with the man I've loved most in my life. If I could go back in time, I would change so many things about my life. The pain I feel now is not just because I lost Bruno, but because I was the one who pushed him away, all for a whim, a stupidity. I thought I was acting out of justice, but what I did was destroy something beautiful. I met Bruno at a mall, the Westfield Valley Fair in San Jose, California. It was a typical afternoon and I was in a bookstore checking out some self-help books. I've always been interested in reading about how to improve myself as a person, although ironically I never applied much of what I learned there. That's when Bruno approached me, tall, brown hair, with that carefree smile that seemed to light up everything around him. He asked me if I could recommend a book for his sister, something about how to deal with stress. I don't know why, but I immediately felt comfortable with him. We ended up talking for almost an hour, and when we said goodbye we exchanged numbers. Something about him made me think that maybe, just maybe, I had found someone special. And I did. I just didn't know how to appreciate him until it was too late. Bruno and I started dating shortly after we met. He worked as a freelance graphic designer, while I was an administrative assistant at a local company. Our jobs were different, but we were both passionate about what we did. Bruno always said he loved the freedom of working from home, while I enjoyed the structure and routine of my office. Our first few months together were magical. He was the kind of person who found joy in the simplest things. A walk in the park, an old movie on the couch, or even a poorly brewed cup of coffee in the morning. His optimism was contagious, and although sometimes I felt he took things too lightly, I learned to love him for that. I, on the other hand, was more meticulous and sometimes a bit of a perfectionist. I liked everything to be in its place, things done a certain way. Bruno used to joke that I should relax more, but he never said it with bad intentions. He had a unique ability to balance my stressful moments with his calmness. A year after we started dating, we decided to move in together. It was a decision that took time, but in the end we both knew it was the next step. We found a small apartment in Willow Glen, a charming neighborhood in San Jose. It wasn't big, but it was cozy and we decorated it together, combining my love for neutral colors with his taste for vintage furniture. Living together was a new and exciting experience. Bruno was tidy, although in his own way. He could spend hours adjusting a picture on the wall to make it perfect, but he would leave coffee cups in the sink for days. I, on the other hand, had a strict schedule for cleaning and organizing everything. Sometimes there were small tensions on his part. As the months passed, our lives began to intertwine more. We talked about our future, about having children someday, although I didn't feel ready. I always told him that I could barely take care of myself, much less a child, and he understood. That was what I loved most about Bruno. His patience and his ability to accept my insecurities without judging me. However, not everything was perfect. As we got used to living together, small tensions began to arise. I was someone who easily felt hurt or annoyed by little things, and sometimes I held grudges for days. Bruno, on the other hand, was more carefree and used to joke about things that I didn't find funny. I remember one time he was late for a dinner we had planned for weeks. I had cooked all afternoon, and when he finally arrived, he didn't even apologize. Instead, he said something like, "You're getting worked up just because I'm late?" I felt humiliated and upset, and although he apologized later, I couldn't stop thinking about how little my effort seemed to matter to him. These kinds of incidents began to accumulate. Sometimes I felt that he didn't value me enough, and instead of talking about it, I let the resentment grow in silence. I told myself that I deserved more, that I should receive the same level of effort that I put into the relationship. But deep down, I knew that Bruno didn't do it out of malice. He was simply different from me in the way he expressed his love. At my job, I knew many people, including some guys who were charming and flirtatious. I used to joke with them, something Bruno never knew. I told myself it was harmless, that it didn't mean anything. But now, looking back, I see that it was a symptom of something deeper. I felt unsatisfied not because Bruno wasn't enough, but because I myself didn't know how to deal with my own insecurities. There were days when I came home from work and got upset because Bruno didn't hug me or wasn't affectionate. He would tell me that he was exhausted, that he had had a hard day, but I didn't understand. Instead of supporting him, I felt rejected, as if his tiredness was an excuse not to show me love. That combination of insecurity and resentment began to affect our relationship, and although I now realize that I was projecting my own frustrations onto him, at that time I only saw someone who, in my opinion, wasn't valuing me as I deserved. As the months passed, I began to feel that something was missing. I couldn't explain it exactly, but it was as if the enthusiasm I felt at the beginning had slowly faded. Bruno was still the kind and loving man I had decided to live with, but in my mind, I began to focus more on his flaws than his virtues. He was a joker, sometimes too much, and although I loved that at first, it began to tire me. On one occasion, we went out to dinner with a group of friends and Bruno wouldn't stop telling jokes. Everyone was laughing, but I felt irritated. I thought, can't he take things seriously for once? I didn't say anything at the time, but that little annoyance stayed there, accumulating with other things. At work, things were different. There, I felt recognized and valued. I was efficient and organized, and my coworkers often let me know. There was one guy in particular, Jason, who worked in the marketing department and always found time to stop by my desk to chat. At first, our conversations were about work, but little by little they became more personal. He had a magnetic energy, a self-confidence that attracted me, even though I knew I shouldn't feel that way. Despite everything, I told myself that it wasn't bad. They were just conversations. Bruno didn't have to know because it didn't mean anything, or at least that's what I kept telling myself. However, there was a constant thought in my head. Why can't I feel this appreciated at home? One night, after a long day at work, I came home hoping Bruno would be in a better mood. It had been a difficult week for both of us, but I was hoping we could spend some time together and reconnect. However, when I walked in, I found him on the couch watching a Champions League soccer game, completely absorbed. Not even a hello, I said, feeling irritated. Hi, love, he replied without looking away from the screen. That simple dismissal infuriated me more than it should have. I felt invisible, as if I didn't matter enough for him to give me his attention for a few seconds. I went straight to the bedroom, slamming the door harder than necessary. Bruno followed me shortly after, confused. What's wrong now? He asked, clearly tired of my constant mood swings. What's wrong is that it seems like you prefer anything before spending time with me, I blurted out, an unfair accusation on my part. The days at the office became a refuge for me, not because I was particularly happy with my work, but because it was a place where I could avoid facing the problems at home. Plus, there was Jason, always with his ready smile and his ability to make me laugh. One afternoon, while we were having coffee in the break room, Jason mentioned something that made me think. You know, Clara, you have incredible energy. I don't understand how someone couldn't appreciate you. It was a casual phrase, probably without malice, but it stuck with me. Did Bruno not appreciate me? Was I wasting my time with someone who didn't know how to value what he had in front of him? That same night, when Bruno came home late, I tried to talk to him about how I felt. I told him that I needed more attention, more affection, more something. But he just nodded, said he understood and that he would try to improve. His response seemed mechanical, as if he just wanted to end the conversation. I started to build a narrative in my head, one in which I was the victim of a relationship where I wasn't being given what I deserved. And although now I know that wasn't true, at that moment I believed it with all my heart. The change started with something small. A text message to Jason outside of work hours, something completely innocent. Then a coffee after work, which was initially to talk about projects, but ended up being a personal conversation. I don't know exactly when I crossed the line, but soon I found myself looking for excuses to stay longer at the office, or to avoid spending time at home with Bruno. He started to notice. One night while we were having dinner, he looked at me intently and asked, "Is everything okay between us?" "Sure, why do you ask?" I replied, avoiding his gaze. "I feel you're distant, like you're somewhere else." I wanted to tell him the truth, to confess how I felt, but fear and pride stopped me. So I just smiled and changed the subject, not knowing that each time I was moving further away from the person who had loved me the most. Inside, I knew that what I was doing was wrong. Bruno didn't deserve my indifference, my resentment, or my little emotional betrayals. But instead of facing my own insecurities and working on our relationship, I chose the easiest path, to blame him. Jason, on the other hand, was an escape from all of that. With him, there were no conflicts or responsibilities. Everything was light and exciting, but also superficial. And although I didn't see it at the time, Now I know I was projecting my own frustrations in my relationship with Bruno and looking for something in Jason that only I could give myself: validation. The weeks passed and my relationship with Jason began to transform from something platonic to something more emotionally charged. At first, they were innocent jokes, casual touches that seemed accidental, but that left an electrifying sensation. It was like I was playing with fire and the excitement blinded me to what I was really doing. One night after a long day at work, Jason invited me to stay for a few drinks with him and other colleagues. I accepted without thinking too much, seeing this as an opportunity to clear my head and enjoy myself a little. However, the others left early, leaving me alone with Jason. "You know, Clara, I think Bruno doesn't know what he has with you," he said while pouring another drink. His comment made me smile, although something inside me knew I was crossing a dangerous line. However, at that moment I didn't care. The attention he gave me was addictive. It made me feel seen, something that seemed to be scarce at home lately. Nothing physical happened that night, but emotionally the damage was already done. I had started to get involved with someone else, and even though I could still back down, I didn't. At home, Bruno began to notice my distant behavior. His jokes, which used to make me laugh, now irritated me. His exhaustion when he arrived from work seemed like an excuse not to spend time with me. One night, while we were having dinner in silence, he put down his cutlery on the table and looked at me seriously. "Clara," he said, "I need to know if something is wrong. I feel like I'm losing you." His tone was genuine, almost pleading, but I interpreted it as an accusation. Instead of facing the truth, I got defensive. "Don't be silly, Bruno, I'm just tired from work, nothing more." He nodded slowly, but his eyes reflected something else: doubt. He didn't insist, but I knew he didn't quite believe me. And instead of feeling guilty, I got angry. I thought, why does he have to make this harder than it already is? In my mind, I began to justify my behavior. I convinced myself that Bruno was to blame for not trying hard enough, for not being as affectionate as before. What was so wrong with looking for a little fun and validation outside of our relationship? I wasn't doing anything wrong. Or at least that's what I kept telling myself constantly. At work, my relationship with Jason became more evident. Coworkers began to glance and make comments in hushed tones, but I ignored them. Jason also seemed to enjoy the attention, and that made me feel special. It was as if we were in our own world, one where there were no responsibilities or commitments. But at home, things continued to deteriorate. Bruno tried to keep the relationship afloat by making small gestures, like bringing me flowers or cooking my favorite dinner. But I was too caught up in my own narrative to appreciate it. One afternoon, Bruno sent me a message saying he would be late from work due to a meeting. Instead of staying home waiting for him, I decided to go out with Jason. We went to a nearby bar, and after a few drinks, the line I had been trying not to cross completely disappeared. I can't remember exactly how it happened, but that night I ended up at his apartment. It was a mistake, a moment of weakness that I wish I could erase. But at that moment I didn't feel guilt, just a mixture of adrenaline and emptiness. When I got home, Bruno was already asleep. I lay down next to him, feeling strangely disconnected from the person who had been my everything. I convinced myself that what I had done wasn't so serious, that I didn't need to tell him. But the weight of my actions began to slowly sink me. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions. I tried to act as if nothing had happened, but Bruno noticed something different. His questions became more frequent and his gaze, laden with suspicion, made me nervous. One morning after returning from working late, I found a note on the dining room table. "Clara, I know what you did. I'm not going to confront you or make you feel worse than you probably already do. I just want you to know that I deserve better. I'm not going to waste any more time on a relationship that isn't worth it. Don't try to contact me." I read the note over and over, feeling my world crumble. I knew I had ruined everything, but I never thought Bruno would actually leave. I tried calling him, sending him messages, but he blocked me on all platforms. It was as if he had disappeared from my life completely. The first few weeks after his departure were hell. I felt lost, as if a part of me had been ripped out. I quit my job, convinced that this would show how sorry I was, but Bruno continued to ignore me. I spent whole nights crying, reproaching myself. He never really cared about me, and now I see it clearly. I tried writing letters to Bruno explaining how I felt, but I never got a reply. I tried texting him every half hour, but he didn't answer me. I had ruined everything and it was all my fault. It went on like that for several days. I even tried contacting my in-laws, ex-in-laws, but they didn't want to talk to me either, only his mother. But she only spoke to me to berate me for everything I had lost because of my own decisions. I learned the hard way that actions have consequences, and that sometimes there is no way to repair the damage we have caused. I quit my job because I didn't feel comfortable being there, and now I'm looking for a full-time job so I can have some money, but for now I don't have the luck I would like to have. I feel so bad. I wish I hadn't done what I did. My life would be happy if I hadn't done that. Days passed, but through a friend I found out that Bruno was now dating someone. At first I didn't want to believe it, but over the next few days I saw him with another girl I had never seen in my life. How was it possible that he replaced me so quickly? I wanted to yell at him. I wanted to grab that girl by the hair and tell her to get out of our lives. But suddenly I came back to reality. I was the one who was out of place. After seeing that, I went back home and cried myself to sleep in my bed. I really messed everything up and there was nothing I could do anymore. It was too late.